Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome to a Commandery overview guide. So, in patch 1.6.0, we received a huge map revamp that included some expansions adding in new commanderies, as well as some shuffling of old ones and switching of certain counties in different places. So today in this guide, we'll be revisiting one of our old overview guides where we classified each commandery by the type of build that is most optimum for your economy. So, let's get started by looking at what has changed in patch 1.6.0. Well, the good news is the buildings are still the same, so our template builds are still intact. Now, there are some faction unique buildings that have been buffed for every single faction in the game, so if you're playing your own faction, take a look at your new buildings. They're probably worth building, namely if you're playing as Liu Bei. Definitely spam tax collection everywhere, because nothing is better than free income. Well, if you're not as fortunate, or let's just say we take a vanilla generic view, here's what we're looking at. In the old game before the patch, there were a total of 70 commanderies that were divided into 12 3-county commanderies, 22 2-county commanderies, and 36 1-county commandery. And of these 70 commanderies, 16 of them had harbors in the settlement. And this added up to a grand total of 186 total counties on the game map. With the new changes and expansions and the shuffling, we now have a grand total of 73 commanderies in the game. That includes 10 3-county commanderies, 26 2-county commanderies, 37 1-county commanderies. And strangely enough, out of the new 73 commanderies, only 14 of them have harbors. And there's the additional 9 passes or gates that are added in, and those are counties as well, for a grand total of 201 total counties. So you can see there are definitely a lot of rebalancing that happened. We have a reduction in 3-county commanderies as well as a reduction of harbor. So this indirectly nerfed certain things like Sun Jian and Sun Ce's overall economy, as well as bandit faction economy, since 3-county commanderies were basically the best ones for bandits. And now there's 2 less on the map, so that's going to really restrict which commanderies are going to be optimum for the bandit subculture. And overall, this also means we have to re-rank our tier list of the best income commanderies in the game. So the first step to understanding how economy work in the game is that when you have counties that generate income, those income are going to dictate what is the optimum build for your settlement. And therefore, if you have a good combination of counties, then you're going to have the best economy in the game. Your ceiling is much higher. So logically, your first instinct might be that the 3-county commanderies are going to be your best ones, and that's not far from the truth. So let's start there. Of the 10 that are now left in the game, I have ranked them according to their income potential. First on the list is a new commandery added into the game, in Jianning. Jianning is not only a new commandery, it is a Nanman commandery. And if you have seen our Nanman land overview, you would know that the only key difference here is if you capture a Nanman settlement, the settlement itself will never have walls, and it will never give you peasantry based income. It's a very minor bonus. You'll still receive the significant amount of commerce income that is attached to the settlement building itself. So overall, it's not going to get a big hit, especially considering the fact that this is not going to be a peasantry focused commandery. This is in fact the only commandery in the game that has 3 income producing counties: Copper Mine, Spice Market, Iron Mine. They're all Nanman lands, but for the minor counties, Nanman land actually have no effect on the build. It'd be the same as the Han culture. Now of course the bandit versions would be a bit different, but let's talk in the grand scheme of things. If you look at the rest of this list, every single commandery on this list has one of its counties colored in white. And that's because those are non-income producing counties. And in the case of Shuofang and Shu, there are actually 2 non-income producing counties. And not only are these non-income producing, they're actually upkeep intensive counties. So they'll actually cost you money to maintain. So this is why sometimes 3-county commanderies do not outperform 2-county commanderies. Now there are some other factors you should consider. Weapon craftsmen, armor craftsmen have no population limit to the cap, so they are definitely just an upkeep drain, but they do produce weapons and armors which has value by themselves. Farmland commanderies on the other hand, both the rice and grain variations, will provide you 500k population cap, and that will contribute to the all-income boost that were introduced in patch 1.5. So the change to population boosting all income had a big impact on which commanderies can produce the most income, since before that, population only boosted peasantry income. Thus, commanderies like Cangwu, which has a pretty high focus on peasantry income, enjoyed a very good bonus. Now, with the focus on all income, industry income with its high base value is definitely the best income source. Commerce is a close second because you have so many additional ways to boost commerce, and it tends to be easier to get those extra bonuses. Since you get bonus like Emperor Seat bonus that gives you 100% extra commerce, you can easily get another 150% from your settlement building itself, as well as a slew of other buildings like the private workshop, which will boost up to 190%. Now, speaking of the private workshop, we can consult some of our old template guides, and if you have seen those, you will know that industry income and commerce income complement each other. And when I talk about an industry-focused build or a commerce-focused build, you're going to include the other income source in the build as well, since you're not going to be taking up all 6 buildings, focusing on only one of these income sources. So in Jianning, you'll be building your typical industry buildings, as well as your private workshop, which will boost a ton of commerce income, and then you'll tag on an inn building for that bonus. And at the end, you might even add in another marketplace building to help expand that bonus. So that's the idea behind this build. Now, obviously, these are all color-coded by their income sources. We have purple for industry, blue for commerce, and green for peasantry. And then Spice Market here stands out because it is a separate income source. It is the spice income, which is unaffected by any of the other bonus, but all income does include spice. So the new change to population definitely makes Spice Market more lucrative, especially the commanderies that actually have the Spice Market. Previously, you could pretty much ignore the commandery that controls spice and silk. For example, Hanzhong only has a silk trader, and in that case, you can actually build Hanzhong whatever you want. It's actually more effective to build it as a pure utility commandery, because whatever you build is not going to affect the overall income of the silk trader, as it will only synergize with the other 2 silk traders on the map. So back to the topic at hand, and what we really want to know is what's the top 10 commanderies in the game for income. These 10 3-county commanderies are clearly not it, because we have the likes of Shuofang, Anding, Huainan, and Shu, which do not produce much income at all. So let's move on, and we can take a look at the top 10 income commanderies, taking into account of everything in the game map. And on the top, no surprise, we have Jianning, which is actually quite nice because Danyang, or Jianye, was the number 1 commandery since the launch of the game. It's nice to see that the new expansion unseated Jianye from the throne, and we actually have a name change too. Jianye is now just the city name for the commandery capital, and Danyang is the correct commandery name. So we have some familiar faces at the top. Danyang with its harbor, copper mine, and salt mine stands out. Then followed closely behind, we have Taiyuan, which has iron mine toolmaker, and then Poyang, which has the additional weapon craftsman, which will drop your income by a little bit because of upkeep. So from our income commandery list, it will be ranked below Taiyuan, even though you much rather have Poyang. And in the case of you playing bandit factions, definitely refer to the previous 3-county commandery list for your top income producers. And this is mainly for the Han, Nanman, and Yellow Turban factions, as they are purely based on the traditional 3 income sources, as the bandit factions will rely mainly on banditry income. And then moving down, we have a new addition to the list. This is a huge change. Hedong has cracked the top 10, because in place of its old copper mine, it now has an iron mine and a trade port, giving it 2 income producing counties that synergize quite well with industry and commerce. So Hedong is on the top, and Hedong is a nice addition since it is in the north, and it's rare to have a northern commandery hit the top 10 list. And moving on, we have Zangke, who has a very nice synergized commerce-commerce combo for its 2 counties. And following Zangke, we have Changshat, which in the similar idea of Poyang, Changshat would be a bit better than Zangke to own in-game, but will produce a tad less income because of the upkeep cost of the armor craftsman. So these are very, very minor differences, and obviously you will much rather have the armor craftsman, but we're just ranking income here. And moving on, we have Badong, which has always been quite a nice commandery, as it's one of those unique cases with all three income sources, as it does have the harbor building, an iron mine for a county, and a lumberyard. So it has a very interesting income combination, and you're most likely still going to be mainly focused on commerce and industry. You might add in a land development as your last building just for some synergies with the lumberyard and to increase your overall base income so that once you get the population really high, you can have a really big base income to boost. And then moving on, we have Zyan Yang, which is almost identical to Badong in that you have one commerce from the harbor, one peasantry from a lumberyard, and then a mine for industry income. Now, the one thing that's holding it back, obviously, is the farmland here, but it will give it a little bit of extra population boost. So in the grand scheme of things of wanting to increase your overall population for that all income boost, it's going to be pretty good. But its ceiling is still going to be slightly less than Badong because of the high upkeep cost from the farmland building. And lastly, we have Chengwu hanging on for dear life on this list, as we do still have the harbor building with some nice peasantry. So this is one of those unique cases where you can go super heavy into peasantry by selling food here, which also has a pretty synergizing commerce income component when you upgrade the land development to the final level. And you can also produce enough food to sustain your food selling in the local commandery, which is also quite nice, since you also get food from the harbor building, from the livestock farm, and from the farmland itself. So Changwu close out our list on number 10. And what's more important than knowing the top 10 is to know how to build all the commanderies in the game. So I'm going to leave you guys with this list here as I explain it. So I've divided the commanderies into these 4 categories, and these 4 categories are going to dictate how you want to build your commanderies as you progress in the game. We have a list of top tier commanderies on the left, and these top tier commanderies are the ones that you want to give administrators to, are the ones you want to make your capital, and are the ones you want to build tall. And by building tall, I mean upgrading the settlement as much as you can so that you can sustain a good population in the commandery for that all income boost. And these are the top 10 commanderies plus a few more that made the list. Now, while most of these top tier lists are still going to be heavily in the south, we do have a few additions in the north compared to previous patches. We have Hedong, Luoyang, Taiyuan, and Wudu. So that's at least 4 commanderies where you can focus on in the north. And that's the ones you want to focus on as your top tier income producing commanderies. By giving them the administrators and the money to focus on their builds, you're going to generate all the income you need with minimum corruption to carry you through your game. And then moving on, we have our second tier. So second tier commanderies are the ones that are good at being focused on income builds, but they don't have as high of a ceiling because they might only have one specialized county or a bad combination of 2. But sometimes you can't be picky because you're playing the game as your faction, you have your starting location, you can't always migrate to the south for every single game. So whatever commanderies you have, make do with them. So these are the commanderies you could potentially invest in if you don't have any of the top tier ones and you have excess administrator. So if you have your first batch of administrators, look for the top tier commanderies first. If you don't have any of those, move on to your second tier and build these to tall. You still generate quite a decent income for them. It's not the end of the world if you invest in these, as these will still generate respectable incomes. They might be a couple thousand less than the top tier ones. So in the late game, as you conquer more parts of the map and gain access to some of these top tier commanderies, definitely consider switching your administrators over and focusing on those newly captured top tier commanderies versus your second tier ones, which you could consider scaling back a bit if you're tight on food, or if you have extra food, just keep them without the administrator and they'll do fine. Moving on, our third group is actually the key to most of your corruption management. This group is called the food/corruption group. And the key characteristic of these commanderies are they're either food producers or they're a combination of food and peasantry producers that also have a piece of industry producing county. So some sort of farmland plus toolmaker or some combination like that. And these are perfect for minor builds. And by minor builds, I mean city builds. Maxed out at 4 building slots, consume only 6 food. You can generate a lot of food from these commanderies by building a land development building, by building a government support building, and then the key third building is a state workshop. And you want to go with the adjacent corruption reduction version, and you want to spam these 3 buildings in all these commanderies. Some of these have harbor, so harbor will be your 4th building. Harbor will also help you generate a bit of food and also a bit of income. If you need that extra bit of income, you could consider going for the income version of the harbor building, although I highly recommend just going for the food producing version, since these are your food focused commanderies. But if you find yourself with extra food, then maybe go for income version. Now, if you don't have a harbor in your commandery, you can keep it at the small city build, or just upgrade to the city, get the final slot, and then build something like the conscription building, which will increase your seasonal deployment limit, will reduce your redeployment cost, and will increase the rank of any troop recruited there. Or if you don't need that, you can go for a forge, which will help you boost your industry income from your state workshop by a little bit, 20%, but it can also produce you ancillary items and weapons and armor, which is definitely a nice addition, and you can think of these commanderies as miniature versions of your weaponsmith and armorsmith. So very complementary pieces, and there are tons of these commanderies. And the biggest mistake a lot of players make when they play the game is they want to build every commandery as an income producer. And that's when you get in trouble, because you overexpand, you have huge amount of corruption, every commandery is trying to produce money, you run out of food, you can't support the ones that are going to end up making you money, and you wasted a ton of money invested in these commanderies that are never going to make you much money in the first place. So keep these builds small. Even if these are your very limited commandery options in the early game, don't overinvest. Just dump a tax collection building there early on so you don't invest in any money there, and you can still generate a decent amount of income while getting enough food until you can get one of those top tier or second tier commanderies, and then focus on those. And lastly, we have some unique commanderies in the game that's pure utility. You have commandery like Dai, which only has a horse pasture. You have commanderies like Hanzhong, which only has a silk trader. Jincheng has a horse pasture plus a silk trader. Pengcheng only has a temple. And Yongchang only has a spice market. So these are commanderies you can build any way you want. And there are some strategies in the game where you could try to build school buildings to boost the experience on your characters, assuming you can keep them happy. That is one of the biggest assumptions you have to think about when going for school buildings. You can build more forges here to give yourself some extra items. You can build conscription building here to make them your military centers to give yourself some redeployment discount as well as seasonal deployment. Or you can build yourself some land development and just plant some food. That never hurts anyone. So these are kind of build them as you wish type of pure utility. If you have full control of all the silk and you want to build a bunch of marketplace, then maybe you can build a bunch of marketplace here. So you definitely have your options with these, and the only reason why they're separate from the food and corruption builds is because they don't actually produce any food, so that's why they're by themselves here. So that's pretty much the rundown for all the 73 commanderies in the game. I hope these will help you guys out as you play on the new patch, and hope you guys enjoy this guide, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye!